Sadly, even small groups of divers can get bunched up. If you see something cool, in this case a seahorse, give your buddies and the animal some room. Everyone will get a chance. There you go. It would seem that the pointy corner of an island would be the perfect location for an actual lighthouse. But the closest manifestation here is some pretty cool stonework on the front of the Lighthouse Point resort. An old-time anchor and ship cannon in the back add to the nautical theme. Together with the Lighthouse Point residences next door, they offer a self-described eco-friendly experience that still manages high-end embellishments. From well-groomed grounds, to an infinity pool, overlooking the sea pool, overlooking the Caribbean. And they have terrific dive support with sizable lockers for guests. But their ace in the hole is DiveTech, the on-site dive operation. DiveTech offers equipment rentals, boat trips, comprehensive dive training including rebreathers, DPV rentals, and of course support for the house reef. They are one of the few dive shops we've encountered anywhere in the Caribbean that was able to keep their entire staff employed throughout an island lockdown. What did they do? Aside from catering to local divers, many of the staff wrote articles for their blog, like how to capture jawfish incubating their eggs. They are also heavily involved in addressing the stony coral tissue loss disease, which has impacted Grand Cayman and other parts of the Caribbean. Depending on when you see this video, it may be in remission or gone, but we wanted to share some of its devastating effects on parts of the reef. DiveTech contributed by trying various remedies, tracking treatment areas, and reporting progress. Anyway, this wasn't meant as a commercial for DiveTech. We were just impressed by them. We'll share more about their facilities in the site logistics section. As far as nature goes, there are some interesting plants. We didn't see any flowers, but that's probably due to the time of year we visited. The volcanic rocky shore can cause tremendous wave crashes, or create soothing water sounds, depending on the strength of Mother Nature that day. Crabs are often near the water, and check out the tidal pools. This one had a juvenile sergeant major. Elsewhere, you may see a lizard walking around. Although we didn't see any snorkelers here, that doesn't mean there isn't anything to see from the surface. Green and purple sea fans move with the surge in the shallows, and small coral heads are great places to observe sea life. This elkhorn coral, serving as a cleaning station, was in about 4 feet of water. Other notable encounters in the shallows included this porcupine fish, a pretty relaxed tarpon, and a houndfish. We didn't even get to the sea pool. Suffice it to say, there is plenty to see for non-divers as well. Lighthouse Point had a few first-time captures for us, including these arrow squid, leathery and netted barrel sponges, and a sheepshead porgy. We'll show longer clips in the sea life section, but if you want to learn more about these, check out the video description below for links to additional information about each one. Before we get to the site logistics, let's recap. You're already 4.5 minutes into this video, and the information only gets better from here. Plus, 2022 will have all new shore dive collection and tail flicks videos from Curacao and Bonaire. So, why not subscribe? It'll be fun. Thanks. Smiley face. Lighthouse Point is located at the north end of Grand Cayman's West Bay. Although there are shore diving sites around the island, most are concentrated on the west end, which is also where most people stay. As such, directions on Grand Cayman will start from the middle of West Bay Road in the 7-mile beach area. For Lighthouse Point, take West Bay Road north. Eventually, the road curves right. Stay in the left lane and merge onto Esterly-Tibbetts Highway. Proceed for about 3/4 of a mile and take the second exit at the roundabout, which is actually West Bay Road again. Continue on that for 1.6 miles. Look for West Bay Beach and then veer left onto Northwest Point Road. Stay on that for the last 1.1 miles. Lighthouse Point is marked by a couple of street signs. Turn left just beyond the stone building. Parking can be very tight, with the left side under the building reserved for resort guests. There are only 7 spots along the right, although there are 2 more on the property in front of the building. Additionally, there are 5 parking spots on the street in front of the resort and residence buildings. DiveTech can accommodate a ton of divers, with shaded bench assembly areas near the shop, and more exposed benches on the way to the dock and over by the sea pool. Of course you can rent gear here, but they also have a shower, rinse tanks, a bathroom, and a pretty nice dive shop where you can pick up apparel and gear. There are 2 entry points. The sea pool is behind the residence building and has a few pros and cons. On the plus side, it offers a protected entry when the surge is rough. The second advantage is that, well, it's a sea pool, which means lots of creatures come in from the reef. We'll share more in the dive profile section. That said, there are a few other points to consider. First, the opening to the reef is a bit narrow, so divers generally need to go single file and wait sometimes for other divers going the opposite way. It can also be a bit hard to find when returning from the reef, as the rest of the coast underwater looks very similar. That's actually not it. Look for this small channel with a collection of rocks and a cement slab. You still can't see the sea pool directly, but the channel curves to the left. Pro tip: enter the sea pool at the far end and use the ladder or take a giant stride. The closer stairs are doable, however the ramp underwater is very uneven, making balance with heavy gear more challenging than it's worth by saving a few steps. The second entry is off the dock in front of the dive shop. Note that it's not always available, as the metal flooring and ladder are temporarily removed during periods of severe weather or high surge. Here too you can either use the ladder or take a giant stride. The dock is definitely easier to find underwater than the sea pool channel, and is a tad closer to the reef, but it is exposed to surge and waves. Finally, we did see boats pass over the reef close to the buoys. As always, be aware of your surroundings whenever near the surface. In general, the compass headings for Lighthouse Point are 295 degrees west-northwest out to the reef, and 115 degrees east-southeast to get back to shore. There are also 4 buoys to keep you oriented on the reef. The 2 in the shallows are anchored in 20 feet of water, about halfway to the mini wall. The far buoy on the left is anchored just behind the house statue, and the far buoy on the right sits just behind the mini wall, which at that point is more of a slope. As you swim toward the reef, the relatively flat terrain starts to get interrupted by the occasional small coral head. Eventually those get bigger, but never super large. About 300 feet from shore, there is a very nice mini wall. More on that in a bit. Beyond the mini wall, there is a huge sandy plateau that is largely covered with rocks, soft corals, and sponges. Quite a swim after that, the plateau becomes mostly sand, and rocky coral islands start to appear. Those are followed by a long rocky ridge with deep sand chutes leading down to the main wall, which forms the Cayman Trench. Here's a quick look at the terrain in 20-foot increments. As far as highlights go, this is a great place for schools like chub, sergeant majors, French grunts, Creole wrasse, mahogany snapper, and squirrelfish. There was even the unexpected school of stoplight parrotfish grazing in the shallows. The mini wall varies in height, but generally runs from 35 to 65 feet and goes well south of the buoys. Some parts form small overhangs. As you go farther to the north, the mini wall gets less defined, eventually morphing into a simple slope. Just beyond the mini wall is a 9-foot tall statue titled Guardian of the Reef. In contrast to the mermaid at Sunset House, this statue faces toward the shore. Dedicated in 2014, it has some coral and sponge growth, but not that much. On the way back in, you may come across some coral restoration trees. They are not maintained by DiveTech and seem to be in need of some attention when we visited. Of course, it wouldn't be a shore dive collection video without discussing the wonders of the shallows. There are quite a few sea fans close to shore, and some holes in the floor where fish hang out. You'll see solitary smooth trunkfish, small schools of juveniles, and lots of cleaning stations. And don't just swim past small coral heads, take a closer look. There just might be a few blennies taking up residence in that starlit coral. Sea pools are great places to spend time as well. Since they are generally protected from open water, all sorts of sea life stops by. This juvenile snapper was hanging around the bottom, as were these 3 bearded fireworms. We also saw a few sea pearls covered with lavender crust algae rolling around the floor. Take a lap and investigate the walls if you can. Some of the exciting things we found included a juvenile French angelfish, what appears to be a pregnant balloonfish, slate urchin, and smooth flower coral. We even saw a sleeping parrotfish wedged into the wall at night. Also, the Lighthouse Point sea pool was the only place we saw sun anemone. Sea pools rock. The sea life at Lighthouse Point is terrific. We mentioned the schools earlier, but there are a few individual standouts as well. When we visited, a pair of long-snout seahorses were staying in the area. The yellow one was fairly easy to spot, but the dark one blended in very well. We captured 2 new varieties of barrel sponges. At least they were new to us. The ones on the left are leathery, and the ones on the right are netted barrel sponges. Another first-time capture was this sheepshead porgy. Check out how dark the stripes get. We feel very lucky whenever we capture anything in the mantis shrimp family. This ciliated false sequilla was out in the open, and Leslie caught this mantis hiding in a vase sponge on the mini wall. Of course, the rest of the sea life was just as compelling. Here are a few more clips of animals we saw on our dives. Lighthouse Point had a few wonderful surprises for us on the night dive as well. Octopuses were a running theme, as we saw a couple hanging out in the sea pool on the way out, one clinging to some sea rods on the reef, and another out hunting. Staying on cephalopods for a moment, these arrow squid hovering in the shallows were a first-time capture for us. Most of the king helmets we see are stationary, so it was cool to see this one on the move. Drew, my DiveTech guide for the evening, spotted a fairly uncommon beaded sea cucumber, which looked a bit creepy. He also found one of the seahorses. But the best highlight for me was definitely this rough file clam on the sandy floor. It was a bit surprised by the lights and swam, I guess you could call it, back into the coral head. If you come to dive Lighthouse Point at night, here is even more sea life you might see. Enjoy!